Good afternoon. This is our logo process design presentation. So it's how to design a good logo. So there is a methodology with designing a good logo. We start with a design brief, coming up with some of the research we need, references, and then into sketching and concepts of your logos, revisions, presentation, and delivery of your logo. So if we break that down, we first need to understand what a logo is. We must first understand what the main purpose of a logo is. The design process must aim to make the logo immediately recognizable, inspiring trust, admiration, loyalty, and an implied superiority. The logo is one aspect of a company's commercial brand or economic entity, and its shapes, colors, fonts, and images usually are strikingly different from other logos in the same market niche. Logos are used to identify. So let's break that down for a second. What does it mean when we talk about a logo? First, they need to be simple. Simple and easily recognizable. So that means that if you see it on something very tiny or something very large, you immediately know what it is. You know by the fonts, the colors, it's easy to read, it's easy to recognize. The other thing is it needs to be different from what else is in your same market. Your logo cannot look like your competitor's brand, unless that's exactly how you're positioning yourself as a knockoff brand. So maybe you really want people to think that, your Prado bag is a Prada bag. So maybe then you're hiding in as a knockoff. But unless you're a knockoff, you want yourself to stand out as an immediately recognizable brand. Nike does not look like Adidas, does not look like Puma. They're very different in colors, fonts, images, shapes, how they present themselves. That's how you're identifying your brand. So continuing with what our logo is, Paul Rand, who's one of the world's greatest logo designers, states that a logo is a flag, a signature, a street sign. A logo does not sell directly, it identifies. A logo is rarely a description of the business. A logo derives meaning from the quality of the thing it symbolizes, not the other way around. A logo is less important than the product it signifies. What it represents is more important than what it looks like. The subject matter of a logo can be almost anything. So what this really means is your logo is not an exact representation of your company. This example here of the IBM logo, there's literally an I, a B, and an M. IBM doesn't use this logo, however you can find it out there, because it's a real literal term of their monogram, IBM. Okay, you recognize it. You're not going to hit people over the head with, we're selling shoes, so my logo is a shoe. Logos really need to have meaning from the quality of the thing. So it's going to be something more symbolic. It's not the literal picture of what it is. You're identifying your brand. Puma is not selling Pumas, they're selling shoes. What makes a good logo? A good logo is distinctive, appropriate, practical, graphic, and simple in form, and it conveys the owner's intended message. A concept or meaning is usually behind an effective logo. It communicates the intended message. A logo should be able to be printed at any size and in most cases be effective without color. A great logo essentially boils down to two things: great concept and great execution. So what that means is that there's meaning behind your logo, and it's going to communicate that. If you look at the FedEx logo, you'll see that there is a tiny little arrow there. FedEx is a delivery company. There's an arrow in that negative space. If we look at the I Heart New York campaign by Milton Glaser, he really came up with this in the 70s when New York was in kind of a low point and trying to build some very good identity for the city, that people love their city, that they're passionate about their city. And really in our vernacular, we now say I heart something. That's almost derives entirely from this. People didn't used to say I heart Starbucks. I heart my friends. I Heart New York was a unique picture of an emotion. It's very simple. It's very graphically communicating. If this font was slightly different, if it wasn't this typewriter font, it might not have that kind of gritty New York feeling. If it was a nice, slick, clean font, it might be too slick and clean. If it was more of a script font, it wouldn't feel as urban as New York is. So there's that meaning behind that logo. The Herb Llewellyn family's logo. It's very simple. He's communicating family, and he does it very nicely with just adding these dots onto that L in family. So now in shortening one of the I's, so it looks like a little family. He doesn't hit you over the head with it. It's subtle and it's beautiful, and it's conveying a concept and a meaning. So let's investigate the logo design process. Some wonder what's so difficult about creating a good logo. They're small, they look easy to do, so no problem, right? When you only see the result of a designer's efforts, the logo creation can look like it was a simple task, but it's not. It's really not. A logo takes thought and creativity and many elements combined to make a good one. So the first part of doing any logo design process is coming up with your design brief. You need to conduct a questionnaire and interview with the client to get the design brief. If you are doing this for a school project, you should sit down and decide some things about your made-up company. What is my company? What is my company not? What are some of the key words that I am trying to communicate with my brand, with my company? Is my company cool and trendy? Is it homey and comfortable? Is it something you've never seen before? Is it, our family-friendly thing? How are you trying to position? Are you saying our key demographics are people 50 and up? Our key demographics are 14 and under. Who are the people you are trying to get to and reach with your brand? The next part of that is doing some research. So you're going to conduct research on the industry itself, its history, and its competitors. Problem solve first, design later. So with this project, if I said, okay, I'm going to do Spud Nut Donuts. Great. Sounds good. I'm going to do some research on the donut industry, on the snack industry. I understand that my company is a small company, and so I want to see what other small companies in the area are doing. I'm going to research Spud Nuts. What does it look like? What's its history? Who is its direct competitor? So I might look at things like Dunkin' Donuts, the big national chains, but I'm also going to look at some of the other smaller mom and pop shops in the area. So I'm going to look at Peace, Love, and Little Donuts. How are they doing it? And understanding what's going to make people come to this specific business. How am I going to get people to drive to Berea and go to Spud Nut Donuts over Dunkin' Donuts, which is on the way and on every street corner, over some of these other places? How do I understand what is going on and what are some of those trends? Then I'm going to get some references. Conduct research on the logo designs that have been successful and on current design styles and trends that may relate to the design brief. Follow trends, and not for their own sake, but rather being aware of them. Longevity in logo design is key. So when you're designing a logo, you want to make sure your logo is going to be there in 20 years and still look cool and not old and dated. You see brands out there, it's like, well, you can tell that was designed in the 80s. You can tell that was designed in the 90s. You're trying to design something that's going to stand the test of time. So be aware of current styles and trends, but you're also going to want to do research on what are other successful logos in the industry or related industries. Next part of logo design process is sketching and conceptualizing. You've already done your sketches for this project, but you're going to develop the logo design concepts around the brief in your research. This is the single most important part of the design process. Get creative and be inspired. As Danis Graveris has written once, sketching isn't time-consuming and is a really good way to put your ideas in your head right on paper. After that, it's always easier to actually design it on the computer. Sketching helps you to evolve your imagination. Once you understand it, you will always start from just white paper. Sketches are not something that we make you do because we really enjoy giving out sketches. Sketches is the best way to, number one, develop your creativity. That's why we do a lot of sketches. Whenever you're thinking of a logo, you're going to say, okay, well, I've got a couple good ideas. And you've got those 1, 2, 3 easy, obvious ideas in your head. Go ahead and put those on paper. But once you're getting to sketch 15, 18, 20, 30, you've run out of all those immediate ideas, those obvious ideas. And now you're getting creative. So now that you're getting creative, you're going to come up with something different, something interesting, something you wouldn't have done had you not started sketching and kept sketching. Every designer has a sketchbook. They sit down and say, I think better with paper in front of me. Get your ideas out of your head. If you've got, keep a sketchbook with you, just out someplace, you say, oh, I've got an idea. Write it down, draw it down, because you're not always going to remember later. So this is why we sketch. This is why we always want to sketch. Once it's out of your head, it's there, it's concrete. And if you say, okay, I'm not a good artist, good drawer, that's okay. Write some notes next to your sketch. If your sketch looks like a 4-year-old did it, no problem. Write some notes about what you were thinking when you did this sketch. You can always go back and refer to your notes and you're like, oh yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I've got. This is an example of some sketches for the 10th church design. So you can see that she's got lots of notes. This is a famous designer who's done this, lots of notes, lots of different ideas. So she's iterating her process as she goes. This, if I jump back, that's her final design for the 10th church. You don't really see that in any of her sketches, but you see how nice that came together. It's getting that process down on paper. So in the logo design process, take breaks. Break down, if you're assigned sketches, break down your sketches into several per day. If you get 50 sketches, do 10 per day for 5 days in your classwork. Taking breaks throughout the design process, this helps your ideas mature, renews your enthusiasm, and allows you to solicit feedback. It also gives you a fresh perspective on your work. If you just slog through your sketches because they're assigned and your work because it was assigned and you have to do it, it's going to look like you were forced to do it. You're just not going to care. If you let ideas percolate, think about it in the back of your brain, you're going to continue to have fresh, new, and creative ideas. The next part of the design process is revisions and positioning. Whether you position yourself as a contractor, i.e. getting instructions from a client, or build a long-lasting relationship, such as guiding the client to the best solution, revise and improve the logo as required. So don't be afraid to revise your logo. Just because you thought it was the best idea and you think it's pretty good and pretty complete, if somebody gives you feedback, listen to it. Even if you're like, oh, they're just trying to hurt my feelings or they don't like me or my work, listen. It's always helpful to listen and take that feedback to heart. I know we're working in a class situation, but people are always trying to help you. Even if you say, well, I don't agree with that decision, if it's what your client wants, it should be what your client gets. Some of the last parts of the logo design process is presentation. Present only your best logo designs to your client. You can send them a PDF, that's great. If you're actually working with a client, I recommend watermarking that PDF so you know that it's yours. You may also wish to show the logo in context, which will help the client more clearly visualize the brand identity. Preparing a high-quality presentation is the single most effective way to get your clients to approve your designs. So, whenever you're presenting your logos, your brand process, make sure that it's clean, it's easy to tell. You're not going to necessarily show them all the iterations and all the struggles, but just showing here's some of the ideas, here's how I approached it, here's why I approached it. Delivery and support. So once somebody's agreed upon your logo, you're going to deliver appropriate files to the client, give all support that's needed. Remember to under-promise and over-deliver. After you've finished, have a beer, eat some chocolate, and start your next project. So let's break apart what some of the meanings are when we think about logos. And shape is a super important thing to think about when you're saying, what am I communicating with my brand? We've got to go back to the basics and look at the basic shapes that logos take. So in this example, these are all logos that are in circles. Basic circles are nice, soft, round, friendly shapes. You're communicating, hey, I'm kind of friendly, but I'm a perfect circle, so I've got a little bit of that geometric and organicness to our company. Circles are really easy to take and place upon a lot of different substrates. Circles go really easy onto a car, they go easy on a coffee cup, onto your business card, onto a t-shirt. They translate very well onto everything. So if we break down some of these famous logos, if I look at Target, it's really obviously a bullseye. It says Target right there. BMW's logo. BMW started out making airplanes, so their logo is the propellers against a blue sky. that's what that shape means, Volkswagen. There's the V and the W for the people's car. CBS is the all-seeing eye. So they're watching you. With these different logo shapes, they're nice, they're round, so that it has that friendliness to them. It has kind of an official seal feeling as well. If we look at logos, logos can also be an X shape, so don't discount that X grid line to any shape or seal. That can make your company look cutting edge. It can give some direction to it as well. If we think about direction as a principle for your company, it can say, hey, we're going places. So having that amount of direction, generally your company wants to go to the right or upward. Very rarely will that direction point downward or left. Left being that you could be going backwards. Down can mean that you're moving down. If you're not wanting to go down, that's not quite correct. So if we look at the Marlboro logo, that's just this nice, it's supposed to represent the mountain in the distance. If you remember any of their ads, they always show people out on the prairies and the mountains in the background. So it has that sense of outdoorsy. BMG Records, which I believe might be defunct at this point, they're also using a red triangle where we've got this triangle in the negative. Here's a red triangle pointing down. That's supposed to symbolize the needle on a record player going into the groove of a record. Since they're a music subscription company, that makes a lot of sense. So if we look at Amazon, it's everything from A to Z, and doesn't that make you smile? Cool. That's very cleverly communicated. If we look at infinity, that again is a triangle within a negative shape, but this is supposed to represent the road into infinity. That's also showing that direction. You're driving off into infinity. The Sprint logo, if you're old enough to remember the commercials where it's a call to clear enough to hear a pin drop, this logo represents a pin being dropped. So it has that direction of the pin bouncing up and down. Message. Your logo should have a message to it. It needs to have kind of one clear message rather than 4 or 5 messages jammed all on top of one another. If we look at this logo development for Animal Accident Rescue Unit, you can pick which kind of one is your favorite. Everybody would have a different favorite logo, but you need to break down, well, what's the message? So if I say, well, I can see, you know, they're loving, they're rescuing cats and dogs and birds. They're just, if I look at this one, I can say, well, I know they have something to do with animals, cats, dogs, birds. Do I really need to see cats, dogs, and birds to understand what they're doing? And also breaking down this message of, does it clearly communicate at smaller sizes? Can it be simplified? Do I need all this information? And you can simplify. You don't, again, whenever you're thinking about the message of your logo, you don't have to beat people over the head with it. Simple and clever and creative. I really enjoyed these logos for wine searchers, so you can see that you've got these 2 little bottles of wine, but they also make little glasses. So I'm searching, I see the wine, I can look up different kinds of wine. Or Mr. Cuts. I get a sense of what that barber shop is like. Makes the little cool glasses, the mustache, also a scissors. That's a very clever logo. So I understand that this is a barber shop. You know, I get a sense that it's kind of an old-timey barber shop by the way the mustache looks and the glasses look. That, you know, I would expect that there's the red and blue striped pull out front, you know, some leather chairs. It's a kind of a shave and a haircut, kind of a barber shop. I get that from the sense of that logo. It's telling me something without really beating me over the head with it. So let's break down 5 principles of effective logo design, plus a few more, because I can't ever stop at 5. So simple. Number 1 thing with your logo is it needs to be simple. Simplicity makes a logo design easily recognizable, versatile, and memorable. Good logos feature something unexpected or unique without being overdrawn. If it's too hard to draw, or if you have to use a very fine pencil and there's shading involved, it's too much. I tell people when they're looking at starting to draw logos, get a Sharpie, big fat black Sharpie, and some tracing paper and start drawing it. If you can't draw it with a fat black marker, it's probably too complicated. Scalability. The logo must be scalable from very small to very large without any loss of detail and without getting distorted. You should avoid gradients and shadows for this very reason. Also, it should be possible to reproduce your logo on a large number of media like business cards, envelopes, websites, billboards, etc. Your company, if it becomes a large company, you're going to put things onto a business card. It needs to be really small. You may embroider things on the pocket of a shirt. And when it gets embroidered onto a shirt or a hat, it's got to be really simple. If it's got to go on the side of your building, if you think about some of the Nike billboards that are building the size, that Nike logo still works. It also works on the tiny little flap of the back of a shoe. It works across everything. Memorable. Your logo must be memorable. If the name is written in an unreadable, tricky style, has too much curiosity factor or mismatched graphics, it makes your logo difficult to remember. So, if I can't read it, I can't understand what it's saying, I'm not going to remember it. If there's too many things fighting for my attention, so if I decided, oh, I'm going to do spud nuts, but I'm going to make every letter in the word spud nuts that has a counter a donut. So the P, the U, the D, the O, all of those would be donuts. That's too many things. If everything becomes special, then nothing is special. But if I said, okay, I'm doing spud nuts, and just the O becomes a donut, that's special. It's unique. It's an anomaly. I'm going to remember that. So it must be memorable and recognizable. Appropriate. How you position the logo should be appropriate for its intended audience. For example, a childlike font and a color scheme would be appropriate for the children's toy store, not so much for a law firm. So if I was doing a law firm, I'm not gonna have lawyers are us. I don't think I'd want them to get me out of legal trouble, but this logo works great for a kid's toy store. The R is backwards because kids sometimes write their R's backwards. It's fun, it's bouncy, it's colorful. If I'm doing a law firm, I want it to be serious. I want it to look like a law firm that's going to really help you out, that they, actually did pass the bar. A logo does not need to say what the company does. Restaurants' logos don't need to show food. Dentist logos don't need to show teeth. Furniture stores' logos don't need to show furniture. Just because it's relevant doesn't mean you can't do better. The Mercedes logo isn't a car. Virgin Atlantic logo isn't an airplane. The Apple logo isn't a computer, etc. Think about your meaning. Uniqueness, your logo must be unique. Using a slightly altered design from somebody else's logo makes your logo look like a copycat or even associate you with them. Your unique identity does not get portrayed. So again, it's got to be unique. That's why you must do research. If you're coming up with a logo and you said, oh yeah, this looks great, and you realize that somebody else also has a logo that looks really similar, they're going to think you copied. It does happen that you design something, you think it looks great, and you're designing based on something you've seen in the past, and you're really recalling from your subconscious memory. If that happens, just move along and say, whoops, design something that looks too much like somebody else's. It's a great idea, but I shouldn't do a great idea twice. That's why research is so important when you start out looking at logos. Versatile. An effective logo works across a variety of media and applications. For this reason, logos should be designed in vector format to ensure that they scale to any size. Number one thing, you must be doing your logos in a vector editing program. You're working in Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW if you have it, anything that is a vector editing software. Your logo, again, has to go the size of a building. It has to go to a business card. So it must be scalable. Logos are not done in Photoshop. Ask yourself, is your logo still effective if it's printed in one color? So if your logo has to go to just black, just blue, just red, just pink, use it a spot color, is it effective? In a reverse color, if your logo is getting printed on a black paper, black shirt, does that logo work? How do I reverse out the color? Is my logo still effective the size of a postage stamp? Do I need to simplify it once it goes below a certain size? Is it effective if it's on a giant billboard? One way to create a versatile logo is to begin designing in black and white. This allows you to focus on the concept and the shape rather than color, which is subjective in nature. Also keep in mind printing costs. The more colors you use, the more expensive it will be for the business over the long term. So this is true of if you think your logo is getting embroidered on a shirt, every color of thread costs a little bit more in embroidering it. Do you need that many colors? Can you simplify? 1 to 2 colors, potentially 3 is enough for a logo. Timeless. An effective logo should be timeless. Will yours stand the test of time? Will it still be effective in 10, 20, or 50 years? It is very expensive for brands to change their logo and update their brand identity. The words brand identity, when you think of brands and branding, comes from branding cattle. People used to brand their cattle with an actual hot metal iron so that they knew it was their cows. Same idea. If you changed your logo as a farmer, would you rebrand your cows? Probably not. It's expensive and it's painful, at least for the cow. It's expensive and painful for companies to also rebrand. So having a timeless logo that can last 20, 30, 50 years is a good investment for the company to make. Finally, balance. A good balance is essential. This simply means that the overall look and feel of the logo should be balanced to the onlooker's eyes. Every element must be in proportion to the other. No single element should overpower the other. Balance everything carefully. Color schemes, font faces, shape, and line density must interact well with each other. Your logo should feel balanced and complete. You don't want to have really thick, heavy lines in the logo and really thin, skinny font. Everything should look like it goes together. It just matches. It feels nice. The color palette blends well together. It doesn't look like odd choices for colors, odd choices for fonts. Lines are different, weights are different. I can't read it, I can't understand it. So making sure that the overall product looks and feels the way it should to communicate your message. So we're going to look at doing a logo redesign of a student's project. This logo is from one of your classmates, Isaiah, for his business, which is Zayperp Extras. And his company sells mobile phone accessories. So this is his existing logo. You can see it's kind of got the purple and the blue, says Zayperp Extras. When I spoke to Isaiah about this logo, he was asking some of my feedback. And I said some of the big things with this logo and some of the problems with it is that this logo is fairly large. So when it shrunk down, kind of relation, the words of the logo are actually very small. So if I start shrinking this down, let's grab a hold of this here. I'm going to make a copy of it. So if I start to shrink it, you're going to see that the words get really hard to read. Right now I can't read hardly at all. I definitely cannot read mobile phone accessories. So the scalability really isn't there. The other thing is there's a lot of extra information that I don't really need. So I know that this is mobile phone accessories. It's a bunch of different cool cases, but I don't really need to see all this information that's at the top of, your general phone, press home to unlock. I really don't need any of that information. So there's a lot of stuff here that I can get rid of. So when we're thinking about redoing this logo, I want to think about what are some of the key terms and phrases in dealing with his company. So if I brainstorm out some ideas, I'm going to write down some of my keywords. So I'm going to say, okay, well, I know that his company is trendy. I know that it makes accessories and cases, so I know he wants to be very cool, very hip. When I think of these cases, I want the cases to maybe show that they're durable, that they're unique, that maybe there's a lot of variety, and maybe that these cases are shock absorbing. That might be something interesting that somebody might be interested in, is any kind of shock absorption. Maybe they're waterproof. Maybe that it's that you purchase these online. So online shopping. So there's some different things there. Just a little bit of DNA that I can look at and say, okay, well, this is some of the things that maybe I want to communicate, is that, you know, this is a mobile company. They're, you know, they're hip, they're trendy, they're cool, they're unique. It's something you might not be able to find at your, you know, local kiosk in the mall or at the Verizon store or AT&T store. So that might be some of the different, the words that I really want to communicate when I look at this logo. So I went through this in my face-to-face class. So the next thing that we did, these are some of the words that, keywords that our class brainstormed. The next thing we did is we really looked at other logos within the cell phone business. So I'm looking at, say, HTC, that's a cell phone company, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint. AT&T, their logo really is communicating. They were one of the first companies to have a transatlantic phone line so that you could actually call between the US and Europe. And so you see those lines going across the globe. That's really what that's communicating, is that you can talk to somebody worldwide using AT&T. Verizon is supposed to emulate the signal pinging. So here's a signal pinging off of Verizon. And they really repeat this red check mark, red Z in a variety of places. Sprint is that, I talked about it in the lecture, that pin hitting the ground. Here's a couple others that I thought were interesting that I found in research. This case FX, I can see that they maybe do some different cool cases and designs. This mobile photography one, zoom in on these here really quickly so you can see them. Case FX, that's kind of neat. It's really bright, it's a little complicated, but I really like the communication with this one. Mobile photography, I can see that they've got the M for mobile, the phone, so I'm assuming that they have to do with taking a lot of nice photos with a mobile phone. So that's some of the different research I pulled, just trying to see what is out there in the world of cell phones, cases, and what other people are doing. So working with that and some of the words that I'm looking at, I'm going to establish a color palette. So when I break down the word Zayperp, I know that purple is part of that, the name of the company. So I think purple is a really important thing to communicate. So when I'm making my color palette, I'm going to make sure that I'm using purple as my main color. So let me go ahead and sample that here out of the logo. And I also want to use some other colors that are going to support this purple. I'm not really crazy about this blue and purple going together. They're really similar tonalities. So I'm going to look at keeping this a really trendy, cool, clean color palette. So other colors I might use to support this, I'm going to use a black for sure. This cool purple, cool black. I want to use white as part of my color palette. Don't ever forget about white. It is a color. So I'm going to use white in my color palette. And I may also use a gray. So a nice light, like 50% gray, 40% gray, is really going to look nice with this color palette. So here's a nice primary color palette. I may also bring in that blue if I really wanted, was really convinced, yeah, this blue is important to my branding. I may use that as a secondary color. So let me establish here that I have primary colors. So here's my primary palette. There's my primary palette. And I'm going to do a secondary color or a secondary palette. So having a primary and a secondary palette are ways to kind of have a larger palette without getting too crazy with, oh, I constantly have to use all 5, all 10, all colors. But there may be other colors that come in periodically that are still branded so it's consistently used across your company. So there's my secondary palette. So I'm going to sample out this blue. And when I spoke to Isaiah about this, I thought this blue is rather dark. So I said, hey, you know what, let's kind of lighten this blue a little bit and really just make it a lot more simple. So maybe like a 25% cyan. There, that's a lot lighter. So that way it's not going to compete in the same tone as that purple. I'm establishing a bright, bold purple and, you know, a lighter blue that's going to really kind of fall into the background, where this is that purple is still our most important palette, most important color. So now that I'm thinking about the words, I've got Zayperp extras, mobile phone accessories. That's a lot to put into a logo. I don't feel like I need all of that. What's really important, the number one thing I want to communicate is that word Zayperp. So I'm going to type that out, and I'm going to start playing with that word a little bit. So, and I know that I really want my type needs to be trendy, cool, and hip, but I also want it to be a really timeless logo. So I want to think of maybe, since this is a tech company, a sans serif font is going to make a lot of sense. I'm going to work in a Helvetica, like a Helvetica ultralight, really thin, maybe track it out a lot, let's add a lot of tracking to it. When you add a lot of tracking to your words, oops, that was not the correct thing to touch there. When you add a lot of tracking, it kind of slows down the readability. It also makes a really modern looking thing. So it's going to take kind of draw emphasis and draw your eye out a little bit more. So I've got the word Zayperp. That already looks pretty cool. And I'm wondering, do I really need the word extras? Could I abbreviate that in such a way that I'm not using all of this? One of the suggestions from my class was, let's just use a plus sign. That can just say Zayperp plus more things. And so I'm going to set that plus in a contrasting type size. So this is an ultra light, and this plus is in a bold. So setting it kind of as a superscript, maybe I'll make it that purple color. So if it's selected here, there we go. And that right there is a really simple logo. He can use that, when we were talking about his logo, he said, I want to use this across a number of my brands and kind of expand the business too, so it doesn't always have to be mobile phones. So he could have that as a secondary line and maybe just phones, accessories. So if we said, hey, that's pretty cool, but maybe I want to split out. So I've got one idea down. Let's keep going and making some more ideas. This one's pretty cool. I'll leave it there. Let's make a little clone of it, and maybe I can emphasize something. Maybe I can emphasize the word purple or the perp. Something that's maybe not indicative is that, you know, that's supposed to stand for the color purple. So maybe I'm going to make just the PURP heavier. So maybe I'll set that to a regular and make it that purple color. Cool. And that's really set that apart from this. And maybe since it's now the same as the plus, maybe I'll change that plus to something else. Maybe I'll make it more of a light shade. Maybe I can even make it that blue. Interesting. I don't really like that blue. Let's make it gray. Blue is a little too light to work with there. And that's interesting. So let's keep going with this. What if we wanted to emphasize the phone concept a little bit more? Is there any way I could take some of the characters and very simply give kind of a nod to a cell phone? Sure, there's a couple things I could do with that. You know, when we look at generally smartphones, although the new iPhone is not going to have that home button, there's usually a home button. In the back of the cases, there's usually a hole for the camera lens. So we could repeat that camera lens concept. Really thinking about some of the inspiration I pulled. There's a little button here, there's a little button here, and that kind of says Apple, but there's always one in the corner for that camera lens, even if you've got an Android phone. So let's draw a little ellipse. Let me make it match the, whoops, phone here. There we go. Maybe I can just have a little dot there that's kind of indicative of, here's the camera lens on the phone. It's small, it's not really noticeable, but it's just, oops, it's a little too small right now. There we go. So maybe that's just a little nod to that it's a cell phone. Looks something like that. If I really wanted to, you know, maybe I can work on another iteration and play with those colors again. So I've got an all black version. We make this that purple. To really make that stand out a little bit, so you can see that dot a little bit more where it blends here. Even if this one goes to that purple color. They can stand out a little bit more. Let's work with some other ideas. Keep going with this. We're starting to get some ideas, some different iterations. Maybe I could say, okay, well, I've got this word. What happens if I put maybe, we emphasize that PURP on and with a box behind it. Maybe that box can look like a phone. So let me grab a rounded rectangle here and make something that kind of looks like a phone. Kind of a little long. Maybe I need to adjust my tracking so it's not so tracked out. There we go. A little space between the word. It's better. So that way that phone isn't quite so long. It still looks kind of realistically like a phone. Let me drop this out to a white. Make it slightly heavier. Maybe not that heavy. How about a light? There we go. That looks a little bit more like a phone. Make there we go. And have a little dot then for the camera. So that kind of looks a little bit more like a phone, having that phone concept. And then there's something there, there's a little DNA. Maybe I have it's the dot to show that it's a camera. It could get a little bigger. It can also serve as a period, so he can reiterate that that concept over and over within his brand identity. Something else we could do is if we think about the word extras as an X. So instead of having a plus sign, what if we work with an X or an X factor? So maybe I've got this Zperp here, clone it out. Maybe I do something with the letter X in there. That's kind of cool. That's interesting. That's different. And working through these iterations. So when you're working on your logo, this is why it's important to have those concepts, but also those ideas that, okay, what can I pull away from this? So in a really short amount of time, so there we go, Zperp, maybe that X isn't quite working. Maybe it needs to be a little larger. Maybe I can put it behind everything. There we go. Maybe I can hide it behind the logo. I've got a lot of different concepts already here. Not super crazy about that blue. Maybe I'll make it that gray. There we go. That one's interesting. And so there's a lot of different concepts here already that we can work with. And this is not by any means a final logo type development. However, when you look at this, you can say, okay, am I clearly communicating some of the things that I wanted to hit? You know, am I showing that that there's variety? Am I showing that it's unique or durable or cool or hip? Am I hitting some of those trends? Am I showing that there's extras, that there's more to this? Am I communicating phone or phone accessories more than a cell phone? We want to make sure that it's kind of showing like thinking about, hey, could this work for a phone accessories company, and not miscommunicate and say this is for phones. That was a big thing. People were like, was this a phone company? It might be. Some of the other ideas we came up with in class if we're thinking about that shock absorbing, could also work for any kind of Wi-Fi enabled thing. Working with that shock absorbing idea a little bit more, so maybe that Y can turn into and repeat the shape of the P, the shape of the Y. And starting to get some of that shape repetition and patterning. And again, that could be an idea, an identity piece that can come away from the logo and be used on more of the collateral material, much like if we were using, say, this with a dot, he could repeat the dot. As a period, ending everything with a period as part of his brand identity. The plus could be used in a lot of different ways to expand upon his brand identity system when he gets it out. So this is just a quick way to show you some of that process when you're thinking about logos, when you've got the name of your company and say, okay, I'm going to start putting it together and getting those keywords, getting those phrases down, looking at what other people are doing, what exists out there, because I don't want to totally copy. Even though I like case effects, I think that's really cute. I don't want to totally copy that idea. I need to be unique and different from them if we're a similar competitor. I don't want to make my logo look like LG or Android or T-Mobile or Verizon. That's definitely not something I want to communicate. But I want to communicate maybe that this is hip, trendy, and also a timeless thing. So as phone cases change, as phones change really quickly, that, if we go with this logo, it's going to look dated. We wouldn't want to use necessarily a flip phone. Flip phones were cool once, but they're not anymore. So making sure that we've got a logo type that's going to stand the test of time that he can use for years and years going forward. So that's just a brief intro for some of the process and some of the ways you can think about your logos. So getting started, making sure you establish a palette. If you're not sure yet, just work with just black and white. And then when you move forward, you can introduce some of those colors and do interesting things with the colors. Get your keywords and make sure that from your research, make sure that you're trying to hit some. You're not going to hit them all, but you can say, okay, is it trendy? Is it cool? Is it hip? Is it communicating what your company actually is? So thank you for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.